Hello everyone, what's going on? I'm Gareth, Master974 back again today, and yes, it's hot. It's the G-dub, sort of return, I guess. But yeah, I just wanted to do this little video today because I have been meaning to do it for a few months now, and I am gonna sort of rush it and one take it because it is currently 9:22 in the evening my time, and the webcam could just turn off for no reason because it sucks like that because it gets too dark or whatever. But anyway. So I've been meaning to do this video for a few months now, and the idea is basically that I want to switch over to Linux and use Linux full time, except I can't really do that because there's some stuff that I need to be able to do on Linux that I can only do on Windows, at least right now. And so I wanted to at least get this off my chest because I'm still on Windows 10 at the moment. And I know that some people might be like, oh, well, why don't you just go over to Windows 11? And the thing is, that's not really something I want to do. So for context, when I said I wanted to do this video for a few months, I had the original idea back when Microsoft announced they were going to stop updating Windows 10. So that was after October 14th, 2025, just goes to show how long I've been trying to do this video and just been deferring it until now. But yeah, I'm on Windows 10, which means I'm not getting security updates, and Windows 11 is just something I hate using. Now, I'm not going to go too in-depth with this stuff, but I've tried to use Windows 11 on my gaming laptop, and just some stuff that I don't like. I don't like the taskbar. I don't like how some of the options like renaming and copying stuff have been replaced with graphics instead of, text. So it makes doing basic stuff pretty difficult. Stuff like Microsoft disabling the ability to create local accounts, basically forcing you to have a Microsoft account to use the operating system, the forced inclusion of AI into pretty much everything, even writing the code for the operating system, and apparently even Notepad as Copilot and AI stuff in it now. And also that Windows 11 uses an unreasonable amount of RAM when doing nothing. So for those reasons, and probably some more that I'm not getting to, Windows 11 is not something that I want to be using. As I said earlier, in an ideal world, I would switch to Linux and stay there if I could. And I even compiled a 10-point list that I'm just going to quickly go through, which is the stuff that I personally would need to have happen for me to switch to Linux permanently. So the first off, as someone who is a wannabe YouTuber, being able to edit my own videos is very important. And I do know that there is a video editor called DaVinci Resolve that you can use, which actually does have native Linux support. But the thing is, I've been using Adobe Premiere Pro for over 5 years now. And as far as I know, Adobe Premiere Pro has no Linux support whatsoever at the moment. I am spending over £20 per month on it because I am in Britain. And just so you know, my channel doesn't even make that much a month, so operating at a loss over here. And that's just for Premiere, by the way. That doesn't include any additional stuff like After Effects or Photoshop or anything like that, because the price would just skyrocket into absurdity. And it's not like I even know how to use those tools or would even want to use those tools. But for something like DaVinci Resolve, on the other hand, as I said, it does have native Linux support, and you don't even have to pay to use it. I mean, there is a paid version that you can get, but it is free, so maybe at some point in the future I can investigate DaVinci Resolve, make a video with it maybe, and just see how to actually use it and if it's any better or any worse for the sort of stuff I want to do. But I think the one little downside to sort of cancelling the Adobe Premiere Pro subscription would be that I lose out on Adobe Express for thumbnail creation stuff. But there's free software like GIMP that I can use, and I've used GIMP in the past, so again, there's alternatives. That's the point here, is that there's alternatives for this sort of stuff, and thankfully there are, until Adobe Premiere Pro ends up getting some sort of Linux support, which I don't know if that's going to happen, but we can wait and see on that one. Alright everyone, G-dub from the future here, and as I was making this video, I didn't realise when I did the original video recording that apparently there's this red warning triangle in Adobe Premiere now, and if I click on it, it comes up with this system compatibility report that says that this version of Windows is no longer supported, future versions of this app cannot be installed on this OS, basically meaning that I need to upgrade to Windows 11 to get future versions and potentially updates for Adobe Premiere Pro, which is more of a reason for Adobe to add Linux support to their Adobe products, and also why this is an issue for me on Windows 10 right now, because every time I'm going to boot up into this video editor, I'm going to be told that this version of Windows is no longer supported, which is just beautiful, isn't it? And another big thing, being a gamer, is actually gaming stuff. And for me, it's actually more ray tracing stuff more than anything. I know there's multiplayer games like Call of Duty or Battlefield or Rainbow Six Siege that have anti-cheat that doesn't work too well on Linux at the moment. But the thing is, I could just play those games on my Xbox or something if I wanted to. So it's not that big a deal for me that I won't be able to play those games on Linux. What matters is more ray tracing stuff like RTX remix mods like Half-Life 2 RTX. And I even heard there's someone doing a Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines RTX, which is very interesting. Do want to check that out. Is Linux really going to be able to do that very well? I don't know. And another thing is older games through stuff like GOG, like SWAT 4 for example, or Vampire the Masquerade Redemption. Old games that were Windows only, and you'd have to play them through something like GOG. Don't know how well that works on Linux, but I think it should. I think there's something you can use, some software that allows you to get epic games and do GOG stuff. So maybe that's something that works. Another thing is actually the Xbox app. Of all things, the Xbox app. It's mostly because I subscribe to Game Pass Ultimate, and part of that means I get PC Game Pass stuff. I can understand why that won't work on Linux, but I don't want to be wasting money on Game Pass Ultimate if the PC Game Pass side of things is something that I'm not making any usage of. I mean, it's not like I make that much usage out of it anyway, but to have no usage out of it would just be wasting money. So again, maybe there's some sort of Wine or Proton or Winboat kind of situation at some point where that could work, but again, that's just something to throw out there. And getting into some more technical stuff now, something like a Visual Studio like IDE, which is an integrated development environment for the Source stuff that I do on the channel, like Source shenanigans and debugging stuff. Because debugging I haven't actually figured out yet. I do need to give a thank you to Practice Medicine in my comments who suggested that something called GDB can be used for debugging, but I haven't looked into that. And if you have any ideas about how to get it to work, then please let me know. But yeah, I haven't figured out a good way to debug stuff, and Visual Studio Code is the closest thing I found that can be good, but even then it's not the same as, say, Visual Studio 2022. So yeah, something else to potentially consider. Also stuff like Source applications, so the Hammer Editor being one of them, or the Model Viewer, or the Face Poser, even though I don't use that, but they don't have native Linux versions. So you'd have to run them through something like Proton or Wine to get them to work. But a part of me wants to believe that it is possible to create a native Linux version of those applications, especially if, say for example, for the Hammer Editor the code has been leaked already, as much as I disagree with that. But I don't have the expertise to investigate that further to sort of take the Hammer Editor raw source code and sort of gut out all the Windows dependencies and make sort of Linux versions of it. Or even if you don't use the leaked code, you just have an idea of what the application is meant to do. Like you have a viewport that has 3D rendering, and then there's the 2D rendering, there's the properties that are based off of an FGD file, so you need to have file system access. Same thing for stuff like the texture browser or the model browser or the sound browser or the particle system browser. It's just, you know what it is that the application is supposed to do, so you can create an application that does the same sort of thing even if you don't use the raw code, if that makes sense. Part of me wants to believe that something like that is definitely possible, but as I said, I don't have the expertise to actually do something like that. Again, something gaming related that me and my brother have experimented around with is something called the Archipelago Randomizer. Everything regarding that should work on Linux except for Sonic Adventure 2, which doesn't look very promising because that looks like it's Windows only, including the mod launcher for that, which is apparently Windows only. For my experimentation, that didn't work too well, especially Super Mario 64. It just didn't want to compile for some reason, although this was a few months back at this point. And it didn't really end up going too well, at least for my testing, but maybe that was just bad luck on my part or something. Something else as well, which is something I like doing, is music stuff. The Gazatron project. Just subscribe to Gazatron if you haven't already, but I use FL Studio for that, and I don't want to lose any of my projects or samples or whatever. And of course, FL Studio doesn't have a it doesn't have a native Linux version. It only works on Windows and Mac. So again, I don't really want to find an alternative because I've paid a license to use that and it was quite expensive. So being able to use that on Linux would be nice. But as I said, I've got some projects in the works and stuff, and I really don't want to be losing access to that because I would say I'm sitting on some rather underrated bangers if I do say so myself. So more of a reason to subscribe to the Gazatron music channel or follow on SoundCloud or whatever. So something else is that I actually have a Elgato game capture device. It's actually a HD60S Plus, if you can't tell. And this is what I use to record footage from, say, my Xbox. So why I'm bringing this up is because I believe when Half-Life 2 RTX, the demo for that came out, I wanted to play it. Playing it on my gaming PC to record the footage on the Steam Deck through the Steam Deck dock. So just so you understand the situation I was trying to do. But the game capture device just wasn't recognized on the Steam Deck. So I'm assuming Elgato game capture device stuff just doesn't work on Linux. Don't know if there's anything that can be done about that necessarily. So if it's a situation where, for example, I have a Steam Deck, then I would have to play the games on the Steam Deck to record the footage via this onto my current gaming PC to then be able to record or potentially stream the gameplay, but I couldn't do it the other way around. So for example, I don't think something like the Steam Deck is going to be able to play Half-Life 2 RTX at any reasonable settings. So I can't play it on the Steam Deck to use this to record the footage. So if there's an alternative game capture device that could be used, or some way to get this to work on Linux, that would be nice. Another thing as well is my network adapters, because I actually don't use wired internet. I use wireless because it's just the situation I'm in. I can't use wired internet. And the wireless internet adapters I have are awful. I'll just say it that. They're absolutely awful. They're probably 10 years old at least at this point. And I feel like certain Linux distros like Arch Linux or Debian, at least from past experience, won't recognize the network adapters I have. So it would be more difficult to go through something like the installation process if I can't connect to the internet, because I need wired internet, but I can't get that because the network devices are awful. So that's just something else to keep in mind as well for me. And the last point, and I did talk about this earlier, is memory usage. But for my testing, and this is very rudimentary and kind of biased testing by the way, but Linux operating system seems to consume far less RAM in standard operation than Windows 10 or Windows 11 does. So it'd be better for doing the sort of things I want to because there's more RAM to do the things that I want. But if the stuff I want to do isn't supported in the first place, then what's the point? So I guess that's everything I needed to say. I probably would show some video footage of, I think it was Linux Mint, as well as Windows 10 and Windows 11, just having the task manager up with nothing else going on, no Steam, no Discord, nothing like that going on, and just letting it work and just show you the sort of CPU usage and the RAM usage and just how much better Linux Mint was when compared to Windows 10 and Windows 11. But yeah, that's the 10-point list. Sorry for going on for so long. But now for the reason why I'm doing this video today is because there has been the Steam Machine price announcement. Now, just for some context, the 512GB version of the Steam Machine is 879 Great British pounds, which is quite a lot. For a entry-level Steam Machine, and the 2TB version is £1,149, which is... that's bad. That's actually quite steep. And the thing is, I've actually entered the entry line for the 2TB Steam machine. Yeah, that is saying something. You can think I'm getting ripped off or something in the comments, but that's kind of the thing about doing the whole game capture stuff that I was talking about. If I wanted to play PC games, I'd rather have a sort of gaming PC to gaming PC situation rather than just trying to have one gaming PC that does everything. Now, I mentioned that I've got a Steam Deck. Obviously, I don't think I can use that as a streaming device. So I'd have to play the games on the Steam Deck through the Steam Deck dock and stream from or record onto my gaming PC like I'm doing right now for the webcam here. But then the Steam Deck is meant to be a portable system, so and plays at a small resolution as well. So because I have, say, a 4K monitor here, trying to take that small resolution, blow it up to 4K, have reasonable graphics settings, it's just not going to play very well. That's my issue with the Steam Deck. I've got my gaming laptop, which is actually, I moved it out so it doesn't show up in the background or whatever. But that's falling apart at this point. And I know I need to replace the battery, but it's also, the actual screen's just broken, basically. It still works, but it doesn't close properly and it's broken and it needs to be fixed. So, and two things about the laptop and the Steam Deck is that they're awkward to deal with in regards to having to, it would be to stream, I think, more than to play the games, but it's just, they're awkward. Something like the Steam machine, I don't see as being awkward, at least at this point in time. I feel like I could stick it on my desk somewhere and it's going to be a good fit. Of course, I would need a second keyboard and mouse if I'm going to be using, say, this monitor with my computer and then this monitor for the Steam machine, so to play games and then do the stream or whatever the case is going to be. Of course, as I said, I don't know if I'll be able to do it the other way around, but at least that was my justification for wanting to at least get a Steam machine. Of course, the price is very expensive, and honestly, at this point in time, it is the 23rd of June. The 25th of June is when they're going to do this randomized process to determine who's going to be eligible to actually purchase the Steam machines. And with stuff like this, I don't see myself having any chance of actually going through to actually make a purchase. It's just wishful thinking on my end. It's just to see there's the potential. Can I get a Steam machine, yes or no? I don't see it happening, guys. I don't even see myself paying that £1,149 just to get the 2TB Steam machine. It's a bit excessive. Unless Half-Life 3 is an exclusive launch title and Valve have been very quiet about it, I don't see any reason to pay the amount of money for the Steam machines. But at least for someone like myself, it would be nice to be able to have a sort of gaming PC that I can just play stuff on and then use my current gaming PC as just the recording and streaming and the working PC. So, and that would be stuff like the source code tutorials and Hammer tutorials. I can just do that on the Steam machine instead of on my gaming PC. But again, that's just the wishful thinking. That's my thought process. You can disagree with me in the comments. You can call me an idiot, call me insane. But that is pretty much the video. I am going to be taking a day or two to get this sort of edited. I'm probably not going to do a very good job, especially with the audio stuff, but we'll see. I'll probably let you know if I do actually get the Steam machine or not. Alright everyone, I'm just going to add a little addendum to the end of the video because, as I expected, there was some stuff that I didn't include, which I just wanted to go over. So just for some context, today is the 26th of June, about 8:15 in the evening, and I got an email from Steam. I'm just going to check it out right now. And it says I'm in the wait list for the 2TB Steam machine. So when they did the one-time randomization, it ended up beyond the number of units that they had in the production run. So as they work through the reservation queue, some people might cancel the reservations, and therefore I may be moved into the reservation queue and I'll get an email. So to be expected. So basically, even if I did have the means to get a Steam machine now, I couldn't because I'm on a wait list and I have to wait. So kind of unfortunate, but it is what it is at the end of the day. Kind of glad that I'm not forced in a position where I have to choose whether to get one or not, because I think they only give you like a 3-day window to even get the Steam machine. So, well, I guess that's a decision for future me to make. But there's some other stuff that I wanted to put into context as well. So as I said in the video, as I try to find the Steam machine page just to confirm the price, because I didn't actually decide to, get that up for this section of the video. But I just wanted to talk about the cost of my computer over the years, just so it puts things into perspective. So when I first got my PC, at least according to the records that I've got, I spent £1,177.95 back in May of 2018, but I didn't get the computer until, I'm pretty sure, the start of June 2018. So the computer I've got, I've had for over 8 years at this point. And in case anyone has ever been concerned or, just wanted to know the specs of my computer, I've got an Intel i7-7700 processor, got 16 gigabytes of RAM. At the time I got the computer, it had a GTX 1080, and I've also got a Gigabyte H110M-S2H motherboard. So those are like the main components. I don't think I need to go into any additional detail about that. Although when I did get the PC, I started having memory problems first, and then hard drive problems after the memory problems, but not at the same time. And I was able to get the memory, the RAM sticks and the hard drive replaced under warranty. But when the hard drive was replaced, I had to send it back because it was a pre-built computer. So I sent the hard drive back to, get a replacement. And so I got my brother to get me an SSD. I've got that in my system, using it to this day. And I think I've added an extra 2 SSDs since. But I have upgraded from a GTX 1080 a couple of times. So in October of 2020, I spent £653.98 to get an RTX 2080 Super. And then in September 2021, I got the graphics card that I'm using now, which is an RTX 3080, an LHR version, because this was after like the COVID lockdowns and the cryptocurrency scalpers and all those assholes. But I spent £1,108.98 for that RTX 3080, although I did need to get a new power supply, so that was another £104.99. But I did trade in my GTX 1080 and RTX 2080 Super for £565 through CEX or SEX. So yeah, that's the history of the upgrades. And so now we've got a Steam machine for £1,149. So me forking over that kind of money for a computer that I don't know how much usage I'm really going to get out of it, especially for stuff like gaming and streaming and doing Visual Studio stuff for source code tutorials and Hammer editor stuff for maybe Hammer tutorials or other projects. It's like, that doesn't fill me with a lot of confidence. I didn't mention this in the original recording, but it would take a huge chunk out of my savings in my bank account, and I don't know if it's worth it, to be honest. I know some people are probably holding out in hopes that the prices go down, but I don't know if the prices will go down in the future. That's the thing. It's like, do you get it now while you can, or do you hold off until it becomes hopefully cheaper, or does it get more expensive in the future? You don't know. So I am uncertain, but I'm on the wait list, as I said, so who knows, there's some time to contemplate the decision and figure out what to do. And I also saw there was a Companion Cube Steam Machine cover, and I was thinking of getting that, but apparently they're out of stock, and that would have added at least another $130 to, and I don't know what that is in pounds and pence off the top of my head. You don't know if there's any additional delivery charges or anything, so, it was a bit unfortunate. It would be nice to have that, though, to make it look like I've got a Companion Cube on my desk, but it's actually a gaming PC. That would be quite fun, but sadly it's not in my future, at least not my immediate future. And I know I talked about my streaming and recording situation, how I don't want to do it on one computer like I'm doing at the moment. I think you can go back and check my Portal 2 Community Edition video out as a reason why I don't want to be doing gaming, recording and streaming on the same PC. Spoiler alert, there was some problems. But the last thing that I forgot to talk about, which is actually really important and why I wouldn't want to make a permanent switch to Linux, at least at this specific point in time, is because I've noticed in the last couple of months some pretty serious Linux exploits like privilege escalation threats that affects every single Linux distro. You might have heard of it. And as a consequence of that, I've also seen an explosion in AI code fix submissions to the Linux kernel. And I'm not particularly happy about that. Again, it's the kind of the point that I talked about with Windows 11 earlier about how there's AI writing the code for the operating system. Don't necessarily trust AI code fixes or patches to the Linux kernel necessarily. So, that's kind of why I wouldn't want to switch over to Linux, even if every single one of the 10 points that I brought up earlier in the video were to have some sort of solution or workaround or were reconciled in some way. I wouldn't want to switch to Linux because of these issues that have been happening at least over the last 2 or 3 months or so. So yeah, I'll just go back to the ending of the original video at this point. But yeah, that's everything I wanted to say on that front. That is why I want to switch to Linux if I have the opportunity to do so. But I don't think there's going to be any chance that's going to happen. At least not anytime soon. Even with stuff like Winboat, when I tested that was still in early access or early development using RDP. So anything that required graphics to work just wouldn't work. And I think the big problem with that is that it's just using a virtual machine essentially just to get Windows 10 or Windows 11 and then run applications in a virtual machine on Linux to get native functionality. But there's issues because RDP doesn't really have a good graphics driver that you can use. So anyway, that's everything I wanted to say in the video. I've probably forgotten some stuff, but it is what it is at the end of the day. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. And hopefully you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think. And yeah, have a great day. Take care out there. Peace out. See you later. G-dub out and all that. And see if whatever I decide to do next, guys.